Harold showed me all 5 signs, every single one. And I didn't understand what I was seeing until it was too late to do anything but sit beside him and hold his hand. That's why I'm here today, not to give you a medical lecture, but because I'm 85 years old. I was married to that man for 58 years, and I watched his body say goodbye for almost a full year before he actually left. And if I can help even one person recognize what I missed, or recognize it sooner than I did, then sitting down to tell this story is worth every hard minute of it. Most people assume that death in old age happens suddenly. A fall, a diagnosis, something with a clear before and after. But the truth is, the body often sends quiet warnings months, sometimes nearly a full year, before life reaches its final stage. The problem is that most families miss these signs because they seem small at first, too easy to explain away. It's only afterward, looking back through grief, that you see the shape of what was happening all along. I know that feeling. I lived inside it. So today I want to share the 5 signs that appeared in Harold during that last year. Some of them I noticed. Some of them I noticed and told myself were nothing. And one of them I saw clearly and still could not bring myself to believe what it meant. I'm going to be honest with you about all of it, because you deserve that honesty, especially if someone you love is showing these same signs right now. The first sign was significant weight loss. It started with his trousers. Harold had worn the same size trousers for as long as I could remember, decades really. And one morning I watched him thread his belt and add a new notch, and I thought, good, he's been eating lighter. That's not a bad thing at his age. I actually thought that. I told myself it was sensible, but it kept going. His shirt started hanging differently. His face, which had always been full and warm, began to look drawn. And his appetite, Harold had always had a hearty appetite. He loved his supper, looked forward to it, just faded. He'd sit at the table and move things around the plate, pick up his fork and put it down. He wasn't being difficult. The hunger simply wasn't there anymore. I tried everything. His favorite meals, softer foods, smaller portions so it wouldn't feel like an obligation. Our daughter Anne would bring over soup she'd made herself. Nothing really worked. And that's the thing families need to understand. When this kind of weight loss is happening, it often isn't about the food. It's about the body no longer absorbing nutrients the way it should. Muscle mass decreasing, essential systems beginning to slow down. The body, in its own quiet way, reducing what it needs because it knows something we don't want to know. Losing muscle doesn't just change how a person looks. It makes movement harder. It weakens the immune system. It increases the risk of falls. I remember the first time Harold reached for the wall in the hallway to steady himself and pretended he hadn't. I pretended I hadn't seen it either. We were both protecting each other from the same truth. If you're watching someone lose weight without trying, if their clothes are fitting differently, if meals have become something they tolerate rather than enjoy, please don't explain it away the way I did. The body is sending a message. Learning to hear it is one of the most loving things you can do. The second sign was a deep, relentless fatigue. And I want to be careful here because this wasn't ordinary tiredness. It wasn't the kind of tired that a good night's sleep fixes. This was something heavier, a kind of exhaustion that settled into Harold like weather settling in and didn't lift. It happened slowly enough that I kept adjusting without noticing I was adjusting. First, he stopped walking to the mailbox in the mornings. That had been his little ritual for years. Coffee in hand, down the path, and back. Then the afternoon naps got longer. Then he started needing to rest after a shower. Then getting dressed became something he had to sit down in the middle of. Harold had always been a man who fixed things. The fence, the faucet, a neighbor's chair. He'd built half the furniture in our house with his own hands when our children were small. Watching him sit in his armchair and not even reach for the newspaper, not because he didn't care, but because the weight of it felt like too much. That was its own grief, separate from everything else. What's happening beneath the surface, I've since learned, is that as organ function slows, the heart stops pumping as efficiently. Circulation weakens. The muscles don't receive the same oxygen they once did. The body starts conserving, redirecting what energy remains toward keeping the vital systems running and letting everything else go still. It's not laziness. It's not depression. It's the body making choices we don't get to vote on. Many seniors in this stage pull away from conversation, stop doing things they used to love, grow quiet in ways that worry the people around them. Harold got quieter. He'd always been a talker. Our son Michael used to joke that his father had never met a silence he didn't want to fill. But in that last year, Harold would sit with his eyes closed and just be. And I learned, slowly, to sit with him instead of trying to pull him back. That stillness between us became something I'm grateful for now. Not in spite of the sadness, because of it. The third sign was confusion and withdrawal. This one is delicate to talk about because I don't want you to think Harold lost himself. He didn't, not really. But there were changes in how his mind moved through the world, and they started months before anything else became serious. He'd repeat a question he'd asked 20 minutes before. He'd lose track of what day it was and seem genuinely puzzled when I told him. He'd call Michael by his father's name, just briefly, and then shake his head like he was clearing water from his ears. Small things, the kind of things you could write off as tiredness or distraction. And I did write them off, again and again, because the alternative was something I wasn't ready to face. What's happening as circulation weakens is that the brain receives less oxygen and fewer nutrients. Cognitive function begins to change. Decision-making gets harder. Familiar places and faces can become momentarily confusing. And there can be these strange flashes of perfect clarity, moments where the person you've always known steps fully back into the light, and then the shift again. Harold had a few of those moments near the end that I still carry with me. One afternoon, out of nowhere, he remembered the name of the dog we'd had when Anne and Susan were little. And then he looked at me and said, very quietly, that he'd been happy. Just that he'd been happy. I didn't say anything. I held his hand and I didn't say anything at all. The withdrawal was harder for the children to understand than it was for me. Harold stopped engaging in conversations the way he used to. He'd sit through a family dinner and smile, but not really join in. Some evenings he seemed to prefer to simply be in the room with us, present but not participating. Susan took it personally for a while, I think, even though she never said so. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her, that his brain was just quieting, that he could still feel us all around him, even when he couldn't quite reach back. If you're watching someone you love grow more distant, more confused, more still, meet them where they are. Don't try to pull them back to a place they can no longer easily reach. Be close. Be gentle. That's enough. That is more than enough. The fourth sign was infections that kept coming and wounds that refused to heal. Harold had always been one of those people who shook off colds before they ever fully arrived. He hadn't taken a sick day in years. So when the infection started, I told myself they were flukes. A urinary tract infection in the spring. A chest cold that summer that took 3 rounds of antibiotics to clear. A small sore on his foot that our neighbor Dorothy, she'd been a nurse before she retired, quietly suggested I ask the doctor about. I didn't ask quickly enough. That sore took weeks. It kept reopening. Looking back, I can trace the pattern clearly now. At the time, each incident felt isolated, but the immune system was winding down along with everything else, and the body simply couldn't fight back the way it once could. Infections that would once have been minor were now taking hold and lingering. Wounds that would once have closed in days were staying open. One thing I didn't know then that I want you to know now. In elderly people, infections often don't look the way you expect. There may be no fever, none of the classic signs. Instead, you might notice that your loved one seems suddenly more confused than usual, less interested in eating, heavier in a way that's hard to name. A drop in mental alertness is often the first signal of an infection in an older person, long before any other symptom appears. I didn't know that. I wish someone had told me. The hardest part of this stage, for me, was letting go of the instinct to fix. Every time something went wrong, I wanted a solution. One more treatment, one more round of medication, one more thing we hadn't tried yet. And sometimes those things helped. But there came a point where what Harold needed wasn't another intervention. It was comfort, ease. For me to stop trying to turn the clock back and just be there with him in the time we had. That's not giving up. I need you to hear that. Choosing comfort over aggressive treatment at a certain point is an act of love. It is listening to your loved one's body when they can no longer always speak for themselves. The fifth sign was changes in his breathing and his circulation. This was the one I saw clearly and still could not let myself believe. Maybe because it was the most visible, the most impossible to explain away. Harold's breathing changed. It became slower, shallower. Some nights I'd lie awake and listen to it and count the seconds between breaths. There was a pattern that developed. Deeper breaths, and then a pause, a stillness that felt too long, and then breathing again. I looked it up eventually. I read the words on the screen, and then I closed the laptop and went and sat in the kitchen in the dark for a long time. His hands and feet grew cold. Not uncomfortably, he never complained, but I'd hold his hand and feel the coolness of it. The skin around his fingers had a faint bluish tint sometimes. That's the body directing blood toward the vital organs, away from the extremities. The heart doing what it can with what it has. I know that now. Then I just held his hands and rubbed them warm, because it was something I could do. He needed to sleep propped up on pillows rather than flat. He'd get winded sitting up in bed too quickly. Once, during a conversation with Susan on the phone, he had to stop mid-sentence to catch his breath, and I watched him hold the receiver and wait, and there was a dignity in how quietly he accepted it that made me want to cry. For families who witness these changes, it can be frightening. The instinct is to do something, to help them breathe more deeply, to call someone, to find a way to reverse what's happening. And I understand that instinct completely. But in many cases, this is simply the body's natural way of slowing down. There may not be a way to reverse it. What there is, what I found in those last weeks, is a way to make it gentler. A cool, quiet room, a hand to hold, small sips of water, the knowledge that they are not alone. In Harold's final weeks, I would sit beside him and just breathe with him. That sounds simple. It wasn't, and it was. I couldn't fix what was happening, but I could be there. And I have to believe, that it mattered. Looking back across all 5 signs, the weight loss, the fatigue, the quieter mind, the infections, the changed breath, none of them announced themselves loudly. They arrived one at a time, softly, each one easy enough to explain away on its own. It was only afterward that I saw the year for what it had been, a long, slow goodbye that I hadn't known how to read. I don't tell you any of this to frighten you. I tell you because I think the people we love deserve our clear eyes, even when it's hard to keep them open. Recognizing these signs early doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing to use the time you have with intention. More presence, more tenderness, fewer regrets. It means you might get to say what needs to be said and hear what you need to hear while the window is still open. If you're watching someone you love move through these changes right now, you are not alone. So many of us have walked this road. It is never easy. But being truly present through it, not trying to fix it, not looking away from it, just being there, is one of the most profound things one human being can offer another. If something I've shared today feels familiar, or if you've walked this road yourself and want to say something about it, please leave a comment. I read every one. We don't have to carry this kind of grief in silence. Take care of yourself too, and hold the ones you love a little closer tonight.